Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dr. Aisha Jimini, your course instructor for Anatomy 4. I'm going to start today's session with the prayer, Rabbi Zidni Ilma, Erat Mere Ilm mein Nafa Farma. Let's discuss our topic. Today we will talk about cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid, also known as CSF, it is the fluid which present between the brain and the spinal cord. It is a fluid which is a source of communication and connection between the different parts of brain and the spinal. Nature has provided nervous system as it is a chief source of coordination and controlling the other organs of the system. The nature has provided this system with the protection by different means. We have studied about the skull, we have studied about the meninges, and now we will discuss about the details of the cerebrospinal fluid. We will discuss the entire formation, we will discuss the nature, we will discuss about the composition, physical properties, we will discuss about the formation, synthesis, absorption, and function. Ultimately, we will discuss the flow process. Hopefully, at the end of this lecture, you will be able to understand the nature and the physical properties of the CSF. You will be able to learn the composition of the CSF and apply how the composition of the CSF is important by its nature. You will be able to understand the absorption and the flow of the CSF, and ultimately, you can explain the function of the CSF within the nervous system and its importance. Let's begin with the cerebrospinal fluid. As the name indicates, and told you it is a fluid between the cerebrum as well as the spinal cord. So it serves as a connection, it serves as a linkage between these two organs of the nervous system. It usually runs in the cavities, polo channels, and the canals. It is the extracellular fluid, or it is a form of or type of extracellular fluid. It means that it doesn't present inside the cell, it should be present outside the cells. So the cerebrospinal fluid runs in the ventricles, run in the channels, chambers which are present outside the cells, and it is bounded by the ependyma of the neuroglial cells. It also flows in the central canal of the medulla oblongata as well as in the central canal of the spinal cord. So this is about the area where it will occupy. It will occupy the ventricle, subarachnoid space, and the central canal of the medulla and the spinal cord. So this is about the situation about the cerebrospinal fluid. Now comes to the physical properties which nature has imparted to this fluid to perform its specific function within the chambers of the brain and the spinal cord. If we see the cerebrospinal fluid in a test tube, it seems that it will be clear and the colorless. It doesn't seem that it has any particle or a substance present in it. It is usually around 150 ml within the ventricles and the channels or the cavities of the brain. It is around which range is around 100 to 200 ml, but the average amount of CSF found in the cavities of the brain and the spinal cord is around 150 ml. As far as its synthesis is being concerned, it is seems that it is produced around 0. 0.5 ml per minute. This is the normal rate of formation of the CSF, and specific gravity of the CSF it seems to be 1.005. It is found that CSF is slightly alkaline in its reaction with the other solution, so the pH of the CSF will be slightly above zero. When the pressure is being determined, it seems that it is around 60 to 150 of mercury of water, and the specific procedure to find the pressure is to take a lumbar tap, spinal tap, and the individual for this pressure determination should be in recumbent position. So the pressure of the CSF is being measured when the patient is in lateral recumbent position and through the spinal tract. As far as the composition of the is being concerned, CSF obviously is a type of, is a form of extracellular fluid. So its composition should be the same, or more or less same with the plasma of the blood. It is seen that it has, like other regular form of ECF or extracellular fluid, it is rich source of sodium, as sodium is being present in the extracellular spaces while the potassium is high in the intracellular spaces. Unlike the blood plasma, it seems that the glucose is half that of the plasma of the blood. So this is a slight difference as with the CSF and with the PCF of the plasma of the blood. It is also seems that the protein content of the CSF is again a bit low than that of the blood, as the blood has three different types of plasma protein: albumin, globulin, and fibrinogen. So the CSF is having these proteins, but a very few amount, including a trace amount, as it doesn't have to be meant for coagulation. It doesn't meant protect protect or arm with a number of warriors like the plasma of the blood. So, for nature has provided CSF a slight different composition. It doesn't have same amount of glucose as the blood have. It doesn't have the same amount of the plasma proteins as the plasma of the blood have. As the plasma proteins can serve to be a source of transmission of the substances, and a few plasma proteins provide the immunity. The CSF is provided lymphocytes. Obviously, these are the cells which are meant for providing immunity. Besides the macrophages, the CSF having a few lymphocytes, and CSF usually doesn't it doesn't occupy within the cells. It is present in the cavities or the channels like the ventricles, and also as the CSF flows from the brain towards the spinal cord into the central canal of the spinal cord, it is seen that the lymphocytes are being added at that time when the CSF move from the foramen flesh tangentially into the spinal canal. Then the spinal cord surrounded by the blood vessel, and the blood vessels contain the lymphocytes. So lymphocytes move from the blood vessels through the diaphyses and comes out into the CSF of the spinal cord. You give a chart representing the composition of the spinal cord. You can see over here that the water content of the cerebrospinal fluid is much higher. You can see around 99.13% of the CSF is occupied, is formed from the water, while only a trace amount, about around 0.87% of the solid particles are present within the CSF. Among the solid particles, they are divided into two divisions: organic and inorganic substances. Organic substances obviously contains the proteins, amino acids, sugars, cholesterol, urea, uric acid, protein, and the lactic acid. Whereas the inorganic substances are being concerned almost the same as found in the plasma of the blood. It include the sodium, calcium, potassium, magnesium, chlorides, phosphate, bicarbonates, and sulfates. These are the substances which are present in the cerebrospinal fluid. It was being seen that as the protein are very low as the plasma of the blood, around 15 to 45 milligram per 100 ml of the CSF. As far as the glucose is being concerned, it is around 50 to 85 milligram per 100 ml. The right are higher in number, around 720 to 750 milligram per 100 ml. These concentration of the protein, glucose, and chloride is very much important, as a number of bacterial and viral conditions or diseases can change the value of the protein and the glucose within the CSF, which can serve as a marker for the identification that either it is a bacterial disease or it may be the viral disease. It seems that in a number of bacterial or the viral, mainly the viral conditions, the protein content, as the virus contains the protein part, the protein content of the CSF is being higher. So these normal values of protein and glucose are very much important to know and understand and to recall and remember, as the variation in this normal value can suggest that the person might be infected with the bacterial or the nervous system is being invaded by the bacterial or the viral infection. Lymphocytes are around 0 to 3 lymphocytes per cubic millimeter. Although the number of the lymphocytes may high depending upon the situation of the CSF. If someone is being infected with a different disorder or infection with pathogen, it might seem that the lymphocyte number may be high. So this was the composition of the CSF. Moving towards the formation. CSF is basically is a fluid which is formed from the choroid plexus. So the choroid plexus is the site or the machinery or the factory where the CSF is being formed. The choroid plexus basically is an implant or the plant that is being fitted or adjusted in the specific ventricle. Depending upon the size of the ventricle, a major plant is being inserted on the ventricle. It is seen that the fourth lateral ventricle, based on its high volume or the size, having a larger amount of a big amount number size giant size choroid plexus with high amount of CSF is being produced in the lateral ventricle. Moving towards other ventricles, then the fourth ventricle is on the second number with having a larger size choroid plexus, and then the third ventricle. Based upon the nature of the ventricle and the size of the choroid plexus, the CSF is being produced in each part of the ventricles. So the CSF is being produced by the choroid plexus which are present in the ventricles. Two choroid plexus are present in the lateral ventricles. One is present in the third ventricle, and the one is present at the fourth ventricle. There is no ventricle present in the cerebral aqueduct. There is no ventricle in the subarachnoid space, and there is no ventricle in the central canal of the spinal cord and the medulla. So these channels where they doesn't have the choroid plexus, their function is to just transfer the cerebrospinal fluid from one part to the other part. Choroid plexus basically is formed by the three different structures. The first one is the pia mater, a double fold of pia mater, which is known as coelocoidia. The coelocoidia is surrounded by the tuft of capillaries, which is the major source from where the CSF comes out. So as we have seen that the composition of the CSF, it has the same almost same composition with a slight variation of that of the blood. So all the things present in the CSF comes from the tuft of capillaries surrounding the pia mater. So the pia mater is one of the major source of so the blood capillaries are the major source for the formation of the CSF. Again, which particle has to be added in the CSF determined by the ependyma. As we have seen that there are certain variations in the composition of the CSF as compared to the blood. CSF contains half amount of glucose and a trace amount of proteins. It doesn't have any cells. So, which substances have to be taken into the CSF has to be taken to the ventricles is determined by the ependyma. So the three components are very much important, and the double fold of pia mater, tuft of capillaries, and the ependymal cells are the components which are the units which will form the plant or the choroid plexus, and this will serve as a formation of the CSF. So, as we have discussed, larger ventricle is the lateral ventricle, so the maximum amount of CSF is being produced in the lateral ventricle. As the movement of particles as well as the fluid is from the blood towards the ependymal cells and from the ependymal cells into the ventricle. You can see over here, this is the blood capillary contains the different cells. You can see the RBCs, you can see the WBCs as well as the plasma. Obviously, from here, the substances or the fluid will move towards the ependymal cells, and ependymal cells, after recruiting, after scrutiny of the particles, will move the substances to move into the, will cause the substances to move into the ventricle. So, the movement which uh, required of the substances from the capillary, from the lumen of the capillary to the lumen of the ventricle, the transport is known as active transport, and we all know very well active transport is a type of transport in which the substances are being moved from the low concentration to the high concentration. It means that if the substances are higher in number in the CSF, again they will move towards in the CSF. One most important thing to remember and recall is that the production of the CSF is not the pressure gradient. It is continuously being produced at the rate of about 0.5 ml per minute. Even if there is any obstruction in the pathway where the CSF is being reabsorbed, despite being the obstruction in the site of reabsorption of the CSF will be continuously formed or being formed at a rate of about 0.5 ml per minute. Now move towards or comes toward the absorption. We have discussed the nature, composition, physical properties. Then we have discussed the site where the CSF is being formed. Moving towards the absorption, when the CSF is being formed, how it will be discarded and it will be replaced by the new CSF as the fluid in a body moves in a closed chamber. Likewise, the cerebrospinal fluid will run in the closed chamber in which the CSF with the number of metabolites have to be discarded into the venous circulation, and new CSF has to be replaced by the old, has to be replaced with the old CSF. So absorption is very much important. So the new CSF can come and take the place of the ventricles. Absorption, height of the absorption of the CSF is basically the arachnoid villi. You are very well familiar. In the previous lecture, we have discussed about the arachnoid villi. Finger-like projections are present in the arachnoid matter, and these finger-like projections are basically pushed up into the venous sinuses. So the CSF is being reabsorbed at the venous arachnoid villi into the dural venous sinuses as well as the spinal vein. So let me show you this diagram. You can see that this is the cobweb present in the arachnoid space. As arachnoid matter is a cobweb like sheath, and this is the finger-like projection of the arachnoid villi, which is being projected into a space which is known as venous sinus. So the finger-like projection will occupy the venous sinus. So the CSF as flows in the subarachnoid space move towards the venous arachnoid villi and then move towards this venous sinus. So this is the normal flow from where the substances along with the fluid in the CSF is being transferred into the venous circulation, and it is replaced with the new fresh form CSF. So CSF is mainly reabsorbed into the by the arachnoid villi into the venous sinuses and the spinal veins. A very small amount of the CSF is also reabsorbed into the lymphatics and into the perivascular space. Lymphatics basically surrounds the nerves, as we have described earlier in the previous lectures that whenever a nerve leaves the foramen or the hole of the cavity of the brain, it is surrounded by the layer of dura mater, arachnoid, and the pia mater. So it means that the subarachnoid space is also present in the space or in also present around the nerves. So the CSF present in the subarachnoid space surrounding the nerves leave this space and enter into the perineural space, which are highly supplied by the lymphatics. And from here, the lymphatics the CSF and drain ultimately into the venous circulation. Likewise, perivascular space surrounding the vessels, including the veins as well as the arteries. The space is occupied by the lymphatics. So the CSF being entered into the perivascular space, and from here again lymphatics will drain the CSF and enter it into the into the venous circulation. This is how the reabsorption occurs. Again, the most important principle of the reabsorption is the filtration. Reabsorption formation of the CSF is not pressure gradient dependent. However, the reabsorption of the CSF is dependent on the pressure gradient. It means that the pressure within the subarachnoid space and the pressure within the venous sinuses matter for the reabsorption. If the pressure of the water or the hydrostatic pressure in the CSF will be high, then the movement will be from the venous arachnoid villi into the venous sinuses. So the absorption of the CSF obviously depend upon the uh, pressure gradient between the two channels. However, it is seen that if the pressure in the venous sinuses is high because of the hemorrhage, because of the accumulation of the blood in the sinuses, or the high or the regurgitation of the venous blood into the venous sinuses, then it is seen that when the pressure in the venous sinuses increases, it will not revert uh, into the arachnoid villi and into the CSF. When the pressure in the sinuses increases, it will cause the compression at the tips of the venous arachnoid villi, and the tips, because of the increased pressure, will closed. When the tips of the arachnoid villi will closed, the the increased pressure in the dual spaces will not cause the backflow of the fluid into the venous sinuses into the subarachnoid space. So the direction of the reabsorption is unidirectional from the subarachnoid space into the venous sinus. The backflow is prevented by the arachnoid villi. So we can say that the arachnoid villi serve as a valve which become operated only when the backflow is there. When the venous pressure increases, they will shut down. But if the hydrostatic pressure in the subarachnoid space will be high, it will cause the flow unidirectional from the subarachnoid space into the venous sinuses. It is seen that around 500 ml of the CSF is being formed and equal amount of CSF is being reabsorbed. It means that every minute if 0.5 ml of the CSF is being formed, equal amount is being reabsorbed in an individual with the normal healthy pressure gradient. In case if the pressure gradient is being disturbed, the reabsorption of the CSF will also disturb, however, the formation of the CSF will remain the same. So you can see over here, this is how the system will work, and this arachnoid villi will serve as a valve which will prevent, which will cause the unidirectional route of the reabsorption of CSF. You can see that the arachnoid villi obviously contains the ependymal contain the mesothelial cells, and the space in the mesothelial cells allow the movement of the CSF from these spaces into the venous sinuses. And whenever the pressure in the venous sinuses will be high, the spaces will be decreased to such a degree that they will not allow the movement of the fluid from the venous sinuses into the subarachnoid space. Now comes the functions of the CSF. CSF having multiple functions. First of all, it connects with the brain as well as the spinal cord. Secondly, it protects the spinal cord as well as the brain. It cushions as it surrounds the covering of brain and spinal cord. It is present outside the brain in the spinal cord in the subarachnoid space, as well it is present within the cavities of the brain and the spinal cord. So it protects from outside and from the inside. It provides the buoyancy and support to the brain because of the presence of the fluid outside and inside the brain. We can't feel the weight of the brain over our neck, so it supports the weight of the brain and make us feel weightless on the neck. It serves as a reservoir of the substances, all the substances from the blood which are required for the growth, development, for nutrition of the brain are being reabsorbed into the CSF. So it serves as a reservoir. The drugs we used to take, the medicines we used to take, the hormones from the blood being added into the CSF. So it serves as a reservoir where all the nutritive or all the required substances are present and serve in the regulation of the cranial content. So it nourishes the central nervous system, including the brain and the spinal cord. It also removes the waste metabolites used, which are being excreted from the cells of the brain and the spinal cord back into towards the brain and sinuses. So first from one end and from the blood it receives all the requirements from the blood, and on the other hand it will give all the waste metabolites, discard substances, or the debris which need to be poured into the venous sinuses. So it serves as a medium of transportation. It nourishes as well as removes or clean the nervous system. So an important gland in the brain is the pineal gland, and the other important gland is the pituitary gland. So these two glands doesn't have the ducts for the transfer of its hormones, and for the linkage between the two glands, the CSF serve as a root. These substances, the pineal gland secretes its hormone or the secretion into the cerebrospinal fluid, and through the cerebrospinal fluid, it travels down to the pituitary gland, from which the pituitary gland performs its function. It seems that it was said that the pineal gland is master gland above the pituitary gland, which is obviously I'm talking about the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland is considered as the most powerful gland which controls all the other glands. So it is now considered that the pineal gland is a super gland above the pituitary gland, and connection between these two glands within the brain is mediated through the cerebrospinal fluid. Um, in addition to these functions, cerebrospinal fluid is a medium, obviously, I have told you, where the nutrition substances are present as well as the waste metabolites are exchanged between the blood and as well as the brain. So these were the functions of the CSF. Now comes the flow of the CSF within the channels of the brain. First of all, starting from the box outside the flow sheet, you can see over here the cerebrospinal fluid is mainly formed into the form choroid plexus, and it is poured into the lateral ventricle. The first part or the first site where the CSF is being added is the lateral ventricle. Lateral ventricle obviously have three horns: anterior horn, posterior horn, and then inferior horn in the body. The CSF, the choroid plexus is present in the body and the junction of the body and the inferior horn. So, and the inferior horn is the largest horn of the ventricle as well. So the CSF is being first of all being present introduced in the choroid plexus. The little ventricle serve as a reservoir, a larger storage area where the CSF is being synthesized and being stored. The CSF moves from the foramens of the lateral ventricle, which are present at the junction of the body and the anterior horn of the lateral ventricle. The foramen known as interventricular foramen of Monro. There are two foramens which connect the lateral ventricle, the two sides, with the third ventricle, which is the cavity of the diaphragm. So the CSF moves from the interventricular foramen of Monro into the third ventricle. Third ventricle contains the CSF from the two other chambers. As well as the third ventricle, although have its own choroid plexus present in the roof of the third ventricle. So the third ventricle, besides gaining the CSF from the upper source, it has its own choroid plexus where the CSF is being formed. Although it's a small ventricle as compared to the little ventricle, slit-like ventricle present in the between the two thalami. uh, from the third ventricle, the CSF moves down into the fourth ventricle to a duct which is known as cerebral aqueduct of Sylvius, after the name of the scientist Sylvius, who first finds out that this is the cavity of the third ventricle. You can see over here there is no choroid plexus in the third ventricle. So the CSF just passed through the cerebral aqueduct with no further new addition of the CSF over this area. When the CSF moves from the cavity of the midbrain, it enters into the cavity of the hindbrain, that is the fourth ventricle, which is a diamond or rhomboid shaped ventricle present between the uh, cerebellum and pons and medulla oblongata. This fourth ventricle also receives the CSF from the upper areas. It also synthesizes the CSF by its choroid plexus. The CSF so the roof of the fourth ventricles contains the choroid plexus where the CSF is being formed. So after CSF being entered, when the CSF being present or entered in the fourth ventricle, it has to move into two destinations. The first one is the cerebrospinal fluid and the other one is the central canal. So it has two foramens, the two lateral foramens. The fourth ventricle has two lateral recesses which moves anteriorly, and anteriorly they have a pole which is known as foramen of Fleschka. So we have two foramen of Fleschka at the lateral margin of the fourth ventricle, and in the posterior aspect on the roof on the fourth ventricle in the midline, in the lower part of the fourth ventricle, there is a hole in the center in the midline which is known as foramen of Magelli. These, the lateral two foramen and the median foramen, cause the flow of the CSF from the fourth ventricle into the subarachnoid space. So these foramen serves the transfer of the CSF of the subarachnoid space along with the cisterns, where the CSF is slightly higher in quantity than the other regular spaces. Whereas from the lower inferior margin of the fourth ventricle comes a duct from which the CSF enter into the central canal of the medulla oblongata, which continue down in the spinal cord as the central canal of the spinal cord. In the spinal cord, at the end of the spinal cord, at the level of phylum terminale, at the end of uh, uh, conical area, conus medullaris of the spinal cord, there is the dilatation of the central canal, which is known as terminal ventricle. So the spinal central canal of the spinal cord is a blind duct which ended into the terminal ventricle, which is a distended bulb-like structure present at the end of the spinal cord. So the CSF entered into the terminal ventricle. Obviously, from here it will be move out through the diffusion and through the reabsorption, like in other parts of the central canal is being done. So this is all about the nature, the form, composition, the absorption of CSF. If uh, we just quickly recap the CSF so that we can memorize all the components we have discussed today. CSF basically is the cerebrospinal fluid which runs between the ventricles and subarachnoid space of the brain and the spinal cord. In this way, it serves as a connection between them. It's a form of extracellular fluid having almost similar composition to that of the blood with a little variation. The difference comes at the level of glucose content, or as well as the lymphocytes content, as well as the protein content. Besides these, almost the composition of the CSF remains the same as that of the plasma of the blood. It is produced at the choroid plexus in the ventricles, lateral ventricle, third ventricle, and the fourth ventricle. From here, it moves toward the other ventricle into the subarachnoid space in central canal. It is being reabsorbed at the arachnoid villi into the venous sinuses. Venous sinuses, the reabsorption of the CSF is pressure regulated, but the formation of the CSF is not pressure regulated, and the formation requires the active transportation of the substances from the blood into the ventricles. Therefore, the ventricle is being formed at the rate of about 0.5 ml, and it is not dependent on the pressure. It always keep on forming with the same pace. However, the reabsorption is although depend upon the pressure. If the pressure in the cerebrospinal fluid in the cavities will be high, it will start reabsorbing. But if the pressure in the spinal sinuses gets high, it will reabsorption will cease, as the high pressure in the venous sinuses will cause the compression of the tips of the arachnoid villi and serves to improve or uh, restore the structure, other structure of the brain. So the reabsorption and formation are of equal rate under normal circumstances. Moving towards the reabsorption and then moving towards the flow, the CSF moves uh, formed from the choroid plexus into the lateral ventricle. From here, it will move to the interventricular foramen of Monro into the third ventricle. The third ventricle, it comes into the cerebral aqueduct. In the cerebral aqueduct, it comes into the cavity of the hindbrain or the lateral ventricle. From the lateral ventricle, it has to reach the two destinations, the cerebrospinal fluid as well as the spinal canal. Spinal central canal of the spinal cord. Central canal of the spinal cord contains the terminal ventricle, which is the dilated portion of the central canal. This is how the CSF is being flow into the cavities of the brain and spinal cord. I'm concluding my session with the take-home message that when you focus on the good gets better. So stay positive, stay safe. Till then, take care now.